Hey guys, we are almost finished with Unit 4. We are on Unit 4, Lecture 7. If you're reading along in the book, this is Chapter 15, Section 4. We're talking about China, upheavals in China. We're going to go a little bit before World War I until after World War I. So hopefully you guys remember the name, this guy, Sun Yat-sen. Well, he was the first president of the Republic of China, the first Republic of China. Well, in 1912, he turned over his leadership to a war general named Yuan Shikai. And why he did that was, he was a war general, so he was a tough dude. And Sun Yat-sen thought this guy would unite China under a strong central government, like a republic, people vote for the leader, a good, strong government. But instead, this guy tried to establish a new dynasty. He said, nope, not going to do this big government thing where people vote and all that. Nope, I'm just going to be an emperor. Well, people really didn't like that. The military did not support that at all. The people didn't like it. And all of China plunged into disorder. There were warlords here and there, and the warlords would fight, and they would say, I rule this part of China. No, I rule this part of China. No, I rule this part of China. And they're all bickering and fighting with each other. And at the same time, the peasants were doing really badly. The peasants were really, really poor. There was famine, and so people were starving. And while people were starving, there were bandits, like criminals, running in and taking just the little bit that the peasants actually had. And so all of China is in this crazy disarray. Then, to make things even worse, in 1919, I need to back up just a little bit. Before that, while this whole disarray is happening, Japan is in their imperialist mode, and they force the 21 demands on China. And that's, they're trying to take control of China. And they're saying, you have to do this, or we're going to take over your entire nation right now. And China was so weak at this point because there was all this craziness going on that they didn't have the power to resist. And so they gave in to a whole bunch of it. They didn't give in to all 21 demands, but they gave in to a whole bunch of them. Then in 1919, there was the Paris Peace Conference. Hopefully you all remember why the Paris Peace Conference was happening. And during this, the Allies gave Japan all the German areas. Germany had little colonies all throughout China. And the Paris Peace Conference, the Allies gave all those lands to Japan. And wow, the Chinese nationalists really did not like that at all. They were, nationalist, so they didn't like this at all. And in response to that, their major student-led protest student-led protest. Usually when we say student-led, we mean university. If you ever see that anywhere, student-led this, student-led that, usually it's university student-led protest erupted in Beijing. And then these protests spread all across China, and they became, I'm going to start that again. Student-led protest in Beijing. Then they spread all across China, and these protests were major cultural and intellectual movements. And they wanted to change China and move China forward. They wanted to progress China. The same way, do you guys remember about the Meiji movement? The Meiji movement in Japan? Do you remember what caused that? Hopefully you do. Do you remember that Japan looked around and saw what was happening in Asia? They saw the West coming in and colonizing and conquering these lands. And Japan was like, that is not happening to us. And they had this rapid growth and move forward. They rapidly became industrial and strengthened their army so they would be able to compete and fight off any Westerners that came after them. Well, this movement was all about, I'm going to erase that because that was in Japan and we're talking about China. This movement was trying to get China to do the same thing, progress, move forward, westernize, leave behind, this is a big one, leave behind Confucian traditions. All that stuff, you guys know, I've told you so many times that China didn't want to change. China wanted to hold on, stay how they were. They had their old traditions they had always followed. Well, this movement, it was wild and big and huge and all over China now, this massive movement to try to get China to progress, not only culturally, but also intellectually. And this was called the May 4th movement. And it was big. At the same time that this was happening, and remember, this was because Japan was moving into China. These people thought, well, we need to progress quickly so we can keep people from taking over our country. At the same time the May 4th movement was happening, also some Chinese people were looking at the revolutionary ideas of Marx and Lenin. And the Soviet Union was more than happy to take in young Chinese college students and train them in communism and train them to become communist revolutionaries in China. By the 1920s, there was a whole new political party formed in China called the Chinese Communist Party. So there was the May 4th movement and there was the Communist Party that were both formed to try to help China fight against imperialism coming in and taking over their country. In 1921, this guy named Sun Yixian with the nationalist, I'm sorry, I'm going to start that over. I'm going to start a new page. In 1921, Sun Yishian, the same Sun Yishian from before, the one that had been the president, gave up his power, somebody else messed everything all up. Well, this guy has now, along with the nationalist party called the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang is the Nationalist Party of China. So Sun Yishian, with the Nationalist Party of Guangdong, he set up a new government in southern China. He set up a new government in southern China. He wanted to raise a huge army to take over all of China. Because remember, right now in China, there's no one central power around China. It's all these kind of warlords that are bickering and fighting with each other. Well, Sun Yishian, with the Nationalist Party, which is called the Kuomintang, has set up his own new government in southern China. And he's now saying that they are in control of all of southern China and that they are going to take over all of China. And he went to Western democracies. He went to Western Europe. He went to the US asking for help. Will you help me to conquer all of China? And they all said, no, we're not going to help you with that. And when they said no, he went to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union said yes. And who's leading the Soviet Union at this time? I hope you remember, it's Lenin. He went to Lenin and the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union said, yeah, we'd love to help you take over China. Totally, let's do it. So now the Kuomintang, who was a major, like massive force of people, joined up with the much smaller Communist Party. And they were going to take over all of China. But at this point, Sun Yishian, do you remember what his big thing was about rule of China? He had the 3 principles of the people, which were what? Think about it for a second. The 3 principles of the people. Yes, you're right. Nationalism, democracy, sorry, I messed up there. Democracy and livelihood. So Sun Yishian really didn't care much about what the Communist Party wanted. He wasn't a communist. He wasn't for communist goals. He was just looking for someone to help him conquer China. Lenin and the Soviet Union said, totally, we're down. We will help you conquer China. Join up with our Communist Party and they'll help you. So now the Kuomintang and the Communist Party together are trying to conquer all of China. That was in 1921. Well, in 1925, Sun Yishian died. And a guy named Jian Jie Shi took over. This guy in most of the West is known as Chiang Kai-shek. And they say, really? People say Chiang Kai-shek, Chiang Kai-shek, Chiang Kai-shek. His name was Jian Jieshi, and that's what I'm going to use for the rest of this lecture. But if you are ever, I don't know, for some reason having a conversation about this civil war revolution in China, and you hear someone say Chiang Kai-shek, this is who they're talking about. So 1925, Sun Yat-sen dies, Chiang Kai-shek, Jian Jieshi takes over leadership. He is completely determined to take over all of China, but this guy is not interested in democracy or communism at all. So Sun Yat-sen, one of his 3 principles was democracy. But now the guy that's taken over for him is like, yeah, I don't care anything about democracy. Sun Yat-sen was okay with partnering up with the communists. I mean, it's the Soviet Union that's helping to fund him and sending him soldiers to help him. But Jian Jieshi is like, no, I don't care anything about communism at all. He took the war kind of in his own way. But so he's now really just a nationalist party. And he's working with the Kuomintang, which is the nationalist. And they're still officially partnered up with the communist fighting, trying to take over. But he's really not interested in them. And but so Kuomintang, nationalist. But the Communist Party is now gaining followers all over the cities of China. The proletariat, hopefully you all remember, that's the working class. The working class of Chinese cities. So these are your factory workers, your street sweepers. They were all really sold on this communism thing. They were joining the Communist Party left and right and supporting the Communist Party, and they were all pro-communism. Well, in 1926, the Kuomintang had been traveling north in China and conquered all the way north to Beijing. Let me show you guys a map, just in case, map of China. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay, so they had been, let's go back out a little. They had been down here and they conquered all the way up here to Beijing. So now the Kuomintang is controlling this whole part of China. And then, back. That's 1926, conquers all the way up to Beijing. And then Jian Jieshi in 1927, Jian Jieshi commands his Kuomintang soldiers to attack the Communist Party. not only attack Communist Party soldiers, but attack any communist civilian, anyone that supports the Communist Party at all. Jian Jieshi has ordered his soldiers to kill them all. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people were slaughtered. It was awful. So now is the beginning of a civil war between the Kuomintang, who are nationalists, and the Communist Party. So now there's a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And this war will last 22 years. All right, so this guy named Mao Zedong, it's a capital D, Mao Zedong, who was a communist from a peasant upbringing. He had been raised a peasant. This guy becomes, escapes the slaughter and becomes the Communist Party leader. He becomes like the people, he's a really good speaker and people just kind of flock to him. You guys know that there's got to be someone that just kind of, they're a good leader and you listen to them and you like them, not like in a romantic way, but just you would kind of follow them. If this person wanted to take you into battle, you would follow them. Well, that was Mao Zedong to the communists. They just looked to him and thought he was going to be a great leader, and they listened to him. Well, Mao Zedong believed that the power of the communist people wasn't with the proletariat in the city. It was with the peasants in the villages, because this is an ongoing theme in world history. There are far more peasants than there are anyone else. There are way, way, way more poor villagers out in the countryside at any time in history than there are people in the city. And so he said, instead of trying to get our strength from the proletariat, we should get our strength from the peasants. And Jiang Jieshi is determined to destroy the Red Bandits. He calls the communists the Red Bandits. He's determined to destroy them. And in his war, he's pushing them further and further north. And he keeps winning. He keeps pushing, pushing, and pushing. And from 1934 to 1935, he is pushing the Red soldiers back and back and back and back, further and further away. And in Chinese history, this is called the Long March. They marched for a year to get away from the Kuomintang. But all that time, the whole time they were marching, Mao Zedong, remember, it was his people that were being forced further and further north. He told all his soldiers, no matter what, be kind to the villagers. As you're escaping, as you're fighting, be kind to the villagers. And the Kuomintang were not so kind to the villagers. And so Mao was getting what he wanted. He was winning poor peasants and villagers to like him and support him because his soldiers were nice. So all the way through from southern China, where they had been marching for a year north, retreating, they were running away for a year. The villagers were supporting him the whole way. So eventually, Mao Zedong wound up in this remote northern region of China where he gathered his troops together and they came up with a new plan to plot a revenge against the Kuomintang. Well, their revenge kind of didn't exactly happen because in 1931, Japan looked over and noticed that China was in the middle of a civil war. And they said, this might be a really good time for us to attack. They're fighting each other. We can take advantage of how weak everyone is, and we can go in and swoop over and take control of their entire nation. And Japan will dominate China. So that's what they did. They swept in, and the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party reluctantly joined forces. Reluctantly means they really didn't want to. Remember, the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party are literally in a civil war with each other. They hate each other. They're killing each other. But now Japan has come in to take over. And so the two parties reluctantly joined forces to fight the Japanese off. And the Kuomintang had, let me see. The Kuomintang had been centered in Nanjing. Let's go zoom in here. All right, back out. This had been the capital of the Kuomintang government. And Japan came across, did a big battle here, and the Kuomintang came all the way over here to a city called Chongqing. And I'll show you where that is. There we are. Let me zoom back out. All the way from Nanjing to Chongqing, and this is their new capital. But Japan came into Nanjing and destroyed it. And when they won, when Japan completely conquered Nanjing, it was bad. They really, really, really brutalized hundreds of thousands of not only soldiers, but also civilians and children, women, children, men. Some were soldiers, some weren't at all. There were just people that lived there. And the Japanese, it was really bad. It was really, they were horrible to them. And it was December 13th, 1931. That day is known as the Rape of Nanjing. And I want you, hopefully you are listening to me right now. First, I have a rule. You are not allowed to talk about what I'm about to say to anyone else. Don't mention this. I want to know who watched this entire lecture and who didn't. I want you to look up the rape of Nanjing. You don't have to do any like really long research. Just look at the wiki page or something, whatever. Look at the rape of Nanjing, and I want you to write me something on it. Once again, I'm not telling you, don't write me a 10-page paper. I don't care. Write me one page. Give me one page about the rape of Nanjing. It's a really serious part of history that everyone should know about. I don't care that this is the most perfect paper you've ever written in your life. Don't spend hours and hours and hours on this. Don't worry about that. Just Google the rape of Nanjing, read some articles, read some whatever. I don't care. Look at the Wikipedia of the rape of Nanjing. Read it. Write me a bit about what you learned about it. Do not tell anyone else that I'm giving you that assignment. I want to know who watched this entire lecture and who didn't. That is due on Friday. It's Sunday night right now that I'm making this. So you've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to read about the rape of Nanjing and turn in a one-page essay about it. All right, so in the end, though, the Kuomintang and the Communist Party together did push Japan out. Now I'm fast forwarding right now all the way to the end of World War II. We haven't learned about this yet. It's just good to lump it all together. In the end of World War II, the Kuomintang controlled the actual central government of China. So like if you think the government of Kazakhstan, the government of the United States, the government of Korea, well, the government of China, I put one, World War II. The government of China was controlled by the Kuomintang. This is the Nationalist Party. But the Communist Party, truly, like really, who was really in control of a big part of southern China and central China was the Communist Party. So even though the government of the nation was controlled by the Nationalist Party, there were big parts of southern China and central China that were really communist. They were led by and following the Communist Party. Well, and peasants, the peasants all across China, they supported Mao. If you were a peasant in China, you were all about Mao Zedong. Mao and a communist revolution. They wanted a communist revolution. Soon, Mao forces the Kuomintang off mainland China. The fighting has resumed now after Japan was pushed out. As soon as Japan was gone, the Kuomintang and the Communist Party were back at it. So Mao and his Communist Party actually succeeds to push the Kuomintang off mainland China, and they fled to Taiwan. Let me show you. They fled here. Here's mainland China, and the Kuomintang is pushed off mainland China and onto Taiwan. And Mao takes over mainland China, and there's a communist revolution. And Chiang Kai-shek, or Jian Jieshi, starts up his government here on Taiwan and continues running Taiwan with the Kuomintang as a nationalist government, Chinese nation. He says we are still, I am the proper sole ruler of China, while Mao has taken over mainland China and does an entire communist revolution. We will talk more about that in the future.